Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon and this is Kicking Match, a podcast all about the Irish League. And if you've come searching for some last minute transfer drama, then I have some rather juicy insight on the way, pulp included. Meanwhile, as September beckons, Linfield waved goodbye to their summer European fling. Heartbroken and lost, they don't want to talk about why they aren't going steady with the Europa Conference League this autumn, but we all know who dumped who. Back in domestic matters, some players think the 3G grass might be greener on the other side, except for Carrick, as our pitch is mostly sand at this point. The last song is playing on the transfer window disco, and it's time to shake their moneymaker and make a move, as Aerosmith's side don't want to miss a thing, won't play forever. There's a weekend timetable of games to look back on, and our former principal, Mr. O'Neill, just got the sack for the place he left us to go to. Could he return? Let's spin those chairs round to sit on them backwards, as I'm that cool teacher you always liked, and class is about to be in session. But spit out your gum first, please. Cheers. Big week on and off the pitch, which means I need a big voice to cover all of the good bits. He's a sports journalist with a capital J, and any follower of football in this country will have read this man's work a multitude of times. He sometimes says it best when he says nothing at all. That's due to his impeccable scribing. But he has plenty to chat about today. Writing for the likes of the Belfast Telegraph, the Sunday Life, as well as various other places. It's great to have Stephen Looney on the pod. Hello.
Pleasure to be here, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. This is a big week. There was lots of games and we are approaching the little door closing, the window shutting in the Irish League, and it's not usually a big dramatic time, but the hype and the drama is starting to build as the clock ticks towards midnight.
Yeah, for sure. Every club's looking to maybe secure another bargain before the window closes. There are a couple of big stories knocking about out there, which we'll probably discuss later on. I'm not too sure that we'll see any huge movement before the window closes, but we'll talk about that, yeah.
Well, tell me this, because I saw something that you've written recently, and it's been talked about after the result of the weekend. Jordan Stewart, there's been talk for a couple of weeks that he's unhappy or he wants to move on, and it's all come to a head now. We've saw a number of 125 grand being thrown about. David Healy says he's not going anywhere. The time has passed.
The background to the story is Jordan Stewart is a magnificent little player, flair player, not burdened by self-doubt, Peter. He's a confident player, and I think the long and the short of it is, he loves Linfield, but he wants to play more football. I think he feels he would like to be starting more often. He feels he merits starting more often. David Healy doesn't see it that way, or obviously hasn't, because he hasn't been picking him. I mean, yes, there has been interest from a couple of clubs, at least, in Jordan Stewart. I mean, I spoke to Linfield at the weekend and they said there are no offers in, and that was true, all right. But, I sourced and confirmed the figures, the figure of £125,000. Now, there are different channels for doing these things and getting this message out, Peter. We know that. David Healy may say he may not know where this figure came from. He may not know where the figure came from, but I'm absolutely confident. In fact, I can go even further and tell you that my understanding, again, sourced and confirmed, double sourced, is that Larne were offered. It was intimated to Larne that 125 grand would be the starting point, and it was also intimated to Glentoran that 150 grand would be the starting point. You'll maybe not be surprised to hear. Again, things may change. Jordan would be very open, I think, to a move to Larne. I'm not sure it's going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised if Larne put in, a bid, but it wouldn't be anywhere near. I don't think it would be six figures. I'm not sure Linfield will let him go, particularly after what's happened recently. So I could stand to be corrected, Peter, but I don't think that Jordan Stewart will leave Linfield, but there's definite interest there. I don't think going back to Glentoran it's unlikely. Let's put it like that. It just wouldn't work. It wouldn't work out. Whether Glentoran are being sincere, or genuinely trying to sign Jordan Stewart, because let's be honest, there has been a bit of mischief making between the big two clubs in recent years. So there you have it. Definite interest, Peter. Absolutely, yes. And I think the 125 grand figure was a sort of stay away,
Yes.
hands off. Or if somebody was going to pay 125 grand, fair enough. I probably should say that I was contacted by Linfield on Sunday. They asked me about this figure, and I think while I think the concern from their point of view was that maybe it was portrayed as if you pay 125 grand, you will get Jordan Stewart, when that wasn't the case at all. I don't know that he'll be leaving this window.
This is something that's really stemmed from last season. I remember near the tail end, and particularly that Warren Point game where Stewart came on. He had been frustrated for a while for not starting, and he scored that goal to get the game level. And the look of determination. And I talked to him after the game, and he said, I want to be starting. And clearly the way the season's gone, and Linfield played a lot of games, he's not absolutely guaranteed nailed on to be in that team right now. And particularly with the way Cooper started. And at the minute that Linfield front line seems to be somewhat fluid. But I guess that's not good enough. And I can see where a Larn could be his home. He would be nailed on there to start in whatever formation they would play it in. And player at this time of his career, going into the season, I guess he just wants continued first team football. And we're talking about these figures, £125,000. I'm trying to think really what is the deal that changed this, particularly with European money, and that's been a big talk this week. It's incredible how that is the type of figures that's being bounded about between these teams.
I don't necessarily think it's realistic anymore, but Glentoran broke the mold by shelling out 100 grand for Shay McCartan. Larn followed suit and paid 100 grand for Lee Bonus. That sort of set the benchmark. And I know that there have been sort of, in briefings between clubs, it's sort of been, well, you started it, you set the bar that high. So if you want players from us, then you know what it's going to be. I'm not sure that it's sustainable, really, to be honest with you. You might see it now and again. But if you're going back to the Jordan Stewart situation, Peter, I do think it's those figures, intimated in whatever way they were between clubs as these things work. I think it was more a hands off. I don't see Glentoran putting in a bid like that at all. I don't see Jordan Stewart returning there. And I don't see Larn making a bid of that size. They maybe test Linfield's resolve, and then it's a game of cat and mouse. Jordan he did say after the game against Warren Point, and that was noted by Linfield, that he wants to play more games. Linfield certainly see him as a number 10, playing in behind. They don't see him as a winger. And in fact, I think Linfield might yet be on the lookout for another winger to bring in before the transfer window. That was their plan before their European exit, unfortunately. So, it's unfortunate. Jordan obviously wants to play. And I applaud him, Jordan, for that. Because, Peter, remember, I'm sure you'll be able to say, we all played football. All you want to do is play a game of football. Like, at the end of the day, if you have any passion for the game at all, and nobody wants to be sitting about kicking their heels on the sidelines. So whether it happens, I don't know. I think Jordan Stewart's an absolutely magnificent player. He's a game changer. He's a cheeky chappy. I like him. He's a bit mischievous and scampish and lively and colourful. I like the man. I think he's a smashing player, but I'm not too sure he'll be leaving Linfield.
I'm going to fire some towards you, because as we are sitting here on deadline day, and there's still some question marks in the air, and we go across to Glentoran. Marron has been a player that's been talked about for a couple of weeks. Larn is also being talked about as his destination seems completely frozen out in East Belfast. Is he going to have to try and make good here, or is there a chance there's an exit door for him?
That's a difficult one, Peter. I think Keelan's in a bit of a sticky situation. Keelan will not. I doubt very much he'll kick a ball for Glentoran this season, possibly ever again. Certainly in the first team. In terms of interest, Larn were definitely interested, 100%, no doubt about it. They made a cash offer bid to Glentoran, which I understand was in the region of 40,000. Mick wasn't happy with that. He wanted a player. He wanted Mark Randall from Larn as part of the deal. That deal might have gone through, except for Mark Randall has declared that he's very, very happy at Larn. His family settled there, and he kind of wants to see out his days there. So that set that back. Then late last week, Glentoran fluttered their eyelids at Larn to sort of see if a deal could be revived. And at that stage, Larn had said no, on principle, no. They had made what they thought was a good offer and they moved on to another target. I don't know whether it's going to go through. I know they were looking at a centre half in Scotland, hoping to get that through at the start of the week. It hasn't happened as far as I'm aware yet, but it may well happen yet. Keelan Marron. So Keelan's in a bit of a sticky situation, and Glentoran, like Mick McDermott, is resolute when he says, if nobody meets our evaluation of him, he'll not be going anywhere. Now Keelan might find himself training with the reserves. That's a sort of a banishment in effect, Peter, now. And there is now, if he were to decide that he didn't want to train with the reserves for whatever reason, he would then be fined wages. So Keelan's in a bit of a sticky situation. A lot of the clubs have passed on him. Fantastic player, everybody knows, and he's an absolute smasher. I mean, I just thought he was a cracker when he was at Glenavon. Let's just put it like this. I think the fact that Gary Hamilton is in no rush to maybe take Keelan Marron back, and him being a good player, well, you can think for yourself what that implies,
One player who's also, by reports, is frozen out at his club is Adam Salley at Portadown. That's a team who's could do with a striker of his quality. Is he going to have to make good between the parties there, or is there a chance he could get out of Shamrock Park before the window closes?
Well, I certainly think he would be targeted. Adam Salley, while he, in my humble opinion, wouldn't be absolute top drawer in the Irish League, but he's certainly useful, target man, puts himself about. And just the nature of it, Peter, you get clubs and they're getting close to the window, they want goals. Like strikers will always get a move. Generally, somebody will take a punt on them, no doubt about it. Now, it depends what the club's situation is. I don't know the whole ins and outs of the story. I personally think that he's a player that Portadown could be doing with. Yes, indeed. Portadown's recruitment this summer has been, they've brought a number of players in. On paper, it's not bad, Peter, I have to say. People are sneering at Paul Doolan's work, and I kind of understand it a wee bit. I spoke to Paul a few weeks ago, and he said, quite frankly, he said, I can't compete with the other clubs in the league when there's a defender becomes available or a good. He says, I have to work outside the market that there is here. So he's gone for players with a decent pedigree, National League players or lower league Scottish players. I'm not saying it's not going to come good, but it needs to come good swiftly, Peter. That's my concern. I do rate Paul Doolan. I like him and respect him as a manager. I think he did a good job last season. And I understand it'll take a wee while for such a raft of new faces to come in and gel, but they need to do it sooner rather than later, or else they could find themselves marooned. There's not a bad team in this division, Peter. They're all good teams. It's something that I've been saying to people recently. It's that all the clubs in the Irish League are progressing, but some are progressing further and faster than others. So, if you stand still, you get left behind.
I was thinking the other day, and I looked at the league and I thought there's an argument to say that from 1 to 12, this is the strongest 12-team league that we've seen. There's not, at the minute, I think Portadown's looking like the weakest, but my goodness, 1 to 8 in particular there's a real chance they could take points off each other. It's fascinating to see, and I know there's people out there that are probably shouting at their podcast, and I'm going to quickly leave the transfer stuff here. At Ballymena, we've saw Sam Johnson, he's left for the Welders. There's talk of maybe Jordan Archer moving to Portadown on loan, or potentially Jordan Archer moving on to a team from Linfield on loan. And then finally, Sule. He's been linked to Linfield a lot. Is that likely to go through before the end of the transfer window, or is that just chat?
I don't think it'll happen. Linfield gone into the European tie against RFS, Peter. Not that Linfield were counting their chickens at all. But they had thought that maybe if we get through, we can bring in up to 3 faces before the window closes. That didn't happen. So I don't think, from a club's point of view, that Sule was really not a top priority. That's for sure. I think Fuad Sule is an excellent player. I think he'd be a magnificent signing for Glentoran, for example. I think Linfield felt that they were well covered in midfield, and I would probably tend to agree with them.
Well, I think I really want to shift into that, because it's really been such a focal point of the past 7 days. Linfield, their European dreams are over. It all came crashing down with literally seconds on the clock in extra time at Windsor Park. They were so close to what could have been a fulcrum moment for Linfield Football Club, for the Irish League, and the first ever team from this league going into a European group stage. It wasn't meant to be, and it was taken away from them in just one of the most dramatic, and in many ways, I think if you were a fan of Linfield, it seems a bit hyperbolic, but traumatic. They should have been there. They should have been home and hosed an RFS. Get the ball, and we'll get onto that 4-on-1 later. Get the ball, go up the other end of the pitch, and score with what was almost the last kick of the game. That was just heartbreaking if you're a Linfield fan.
It was traumatic on a mile level. Peter, I was at Windsor for the second game, and like it was gut wrenching, really, really bad. And I'll declare my hand. It's well known Linfield aren't my team, but you like to see all the clubs. You know, people at different clubs. I've really felt for David Healy. That's the person I really, really felt for, Peter. David has a love of Linfield in his heart. We know that. And he really, really, I mean, he puts his heart and soul into managing the job. We know that. You get insights into that from the little emotional, not outbursts, but revealings that we hear from time to time as frustrations come to the fore. He desperately wanted to lead Linfield into the group stages, be the first Linfield manager, be the first Irish League manager. You know, without being cruel, the team shot themselves in the foot over both legs. I mean, I do think the real damage was done in the first leg, Peter. And again, I have to say, people will disagree. I didn't think RFS were particularly good, I have to say. Although remarkably in the first leg, they could have been 3-1 up at half time. But then I thought Linfield came into it, obviously, you know, and they got the goal the first half, second half. And they were cruising, absolutely cruising, and they were cantering to a victory. And I did think that the changes that RFS made worked better than the changes that Linfield made. I thought RFS finished the first game a lot stronger, Peter. Yes, Linfield will point to the corner that never was. Fair enough, yes, but you still got to defend. You still got to defend it. So 2 late goals, 88th minute and 96th minute, a real body blow to the team. But still, I mean, I did fancy Linfield to do it in the second leg. I just think, you know, I like David Healy's stewardship of Linfield. I think he's learned an awful lot as a manager in his time in the Irish League. The mental strength that he demands and has himself, I thought that would carry Linfield over the line. I thought it would be a tight game, but that Linfield would hold on or you know, squeeze through by a goal. And it looked like it was going that way, Peter, you know, it went to extra time, but then Kyle McLean obviously slammed home. And, you know, you thought, this is it. It's kind of the war over here. And you kind of got that feeling in the stands when we were at Windsor, you know, again, without Linfield people, you know, it just looked to be heading to, you know, glorious success for Linfield. And then as you alluded to earlier on, you know, awful, just gut-wrenching at the end. You want to talk about the break, Peter, at the end with Cammy Palmer. It was a smashing break, absolutely was. And I can remember sitting in the stands, we were sitting in the stands and looking at the break. And I was sort of waving at the back line saying, right, don't go gung-ho, you know, hold your line. You don't need to do anything crazy. They did everything right. I think, was it E2 Vertainen passed the ball to Cammy Palmer? I think it was. I thought personally that in hindsight, the pass was just a little bit behind Cammy. He didn't run onto it. He kind of had to stall a little bit. But it was you know, and we've been discussing, you know, with people from Linfield, like if he'd have done anything, if he'd have blasted it into the stands, it was the worst, unfortunately for Cammy, it was the worst possible attempt he could have made. It was very weak indeed. Keeper scooped it and he rolled it out, and RFS went on the break. You know, and I do feel for Jimmy Callagher as well. But I'll put it in context. I thought he was mentally fatigued or physically fatigued, which is obviously translated into mental fatigue as well. It was an unfortunate slice, but I think it was a bit tired from Jimmy. I think he could have, in hindsight, you know, he could have just swept the ball out for a corner kick for talk's sake or got more behind it. But it was a sort of a sluggish slice at it, and it was heartbreaking for Jimmy. I did watch the players troop off the pitch, Peter, and it was gut-wrenching to watch Jimmy shaking his head, going off the pitch, disconsolate. You know, Chris Jones had to be helped off the floor. Cammy Palmer had to be helped off the deck as well. And then David came in, and all credit to him for speaking to us in the media afterwards. You know, but he was visibly rock bad. He was on a low ebb, and, you know, I've no doubt he would have been in a dark room all day on Friday.
Totally understandably, and I think you're right. I don't want to get too caught up in little things like that, because I agree. I looked at that Gallagher thing and I'm thinking, oh, if you just maybe stood tall, did you have to swipe at it? Or, but, that's what happened. Same with Palmer, the ball's there. It's something that I no doubt will be replaying in his mind, but these things unfortunately happen. But they had more than enough chances beforehand. That McDaid chance where he got the ball and it was pretty much a one-on-one. Like, he never had it fully under control. He just lacked that poise to slot it home. But there were so many brilliant performances from Linfield. That's the heartbreaker as well. It's not like they were rattled and they got through it. Shields was amazing. Fallon had so much energy, and I thought when Jimmy came on, I thought that was a brilliant move, because we saw that chance that came in the first half where I think it was maybe Hall, where he was in the 6-yard box, and if it was almost any other player, the ball would have been bang straight in the back of the net. Carrick came on and he gave them something extra from set pieces, and it was just that one mistake near the end. And I do actually feel for David Healy, because I don't know what else he could have done. He made great subs. He set the team out a wee bit differently than he did before, and it worked. And if it just was for a bit of composure and a bit of luck, they would have been there. I almost don't know. I feel like I've been in two minds. I feel like I've lived in a world where Linfield are going to Europe and they're going to get this club potentially changing amount of money. And now we live in this reality where that hasn't happened. And it's heartbreaking, because it's not like they can go and change it. It's not like it's a big, heavy defeat. They lost this weekend again, but they can go again next week and make it right. They almost cannot make this right for another 12 months. And that's the hard part about it, because you just want to change it and you can't. And I feel gutted for Linfield, and this is now where David Healy will earn his chips, because this is now a completely different job. It's about picking these players up off the ground and saying, I want you to get motivated again, because you're going to have to do exactly what you've done 4 out of the 5 last seasons. And you've got to have as much grit and determination as you ever had, because we've seen Glentoran have started really well, and you can see how these other teams are going to be able to find it. And, people always say it's harder to defend the league than it is to win it. And it's now about trying to say to those players, to Kirk Miller and all that great team they've got, you're fighting to make this right next year. And ultimately, no doubt they were fatigued mentally and physically, and these things are going to happen. But it does compound a poor week when you lose to Carrick away, as they did on Sunday, 2-1 at Taylor's Avenue. But credit must go to Carrick. They fought for every one of those 3 points. And from what looked like a hard done-by start to the season for Carrick Rangers, a great win against Newry, and then just ever so close against the other 2 games, it finally all came together and they got the result which has been coming for them. Coleraine, I think, are somewhat the surprise team so far this season. But if Stewart King can keep this going, he will have done a brilliant bringing together of a team there. That was a fantastic win for Carrick.
Yeah, I know Stewart, and I think he's a fabulous guy, number one, and I think he's a very good manager as well. If you speak to him, and he's a footballer. You just know the way he talks. He speaks a lot of sense, and he's a good motivator. He's done some very, very shrewd business in the window. I think Carrick will be okay. I wouldn't get too carried away. Listen, for the glory and for the historical significance, yes, beating Linfield, it's a massive day at Taylor's Avenue for Carrick, but it's only 3 points. Yes, they've got 6 points on the board. Yes, it's a great start. They're 6 points ahead of the likes of Newry, Dungan and Portadown. But Stewart will not be counting his chickens either, Peter. Like, there's a long, long, long way to go. You're a football man. You follow the Irish League. We've had teams start off brilliantly and then get sucked back in. What a goal by Andy Mitchell, huh?
Oh,
what a screamer from Mitch.
Brilliant. But that goal was made from the tenacity of the Carrick players. That doesn't come if it wasn't for the other Carrick players fighting to win the ball back. And look, you're absolutely right. I'm sure King will be sitting here with last year's start to the season and go, we did a brilliant start to the season last year, and in many ways, if we didn't pull it all back at the end, we could have been in trouble. He'll be warning them to say, we go again. It makes that Glenavon game quite interesting coming up. And for Linfield, I don't want to get too caught up. Look, they could have drawn the game. McDade hit the bar. That's probably a good warning shot to them to say, you need to be at this, guys, again. You need to give 100% now.
Linfield will be all right in terms of mental strength. They're a phenomenal outfit for mental strength. Not only do they have good players in the team, Peter, they have characters in the team. David Healy looks for character in any players that he wants to bring in. He knows they have to be strong mentally. They have to have a winning mentality. They have to deal with the pressures of being a Linfield player. And I know that David, he's turned his nose up at certain players he could have signed because he maybe wasn't convinced that they would fit into his ethos at the club. So I have no doubt whatsoever that Linfield will pull their big boy pants on and get on with things again. They've just got too many winners in the team, Jamie Mulgrew, Chris Shields, Stevie, Fallon, as you say, Matthew Clark, like they're studded with guys here. Kirk Miller, we know about. There's a wee bit of an issue about Robbie McDade, Peter. Now that might be a poser for David. Obviously I followed that story intensely and reported on it, the move from Glentoran last season, where I don't think he was treated well at the end of it. I have to say that, being banished to the reserves for the last 5 or 6 games of the season, which actually cost Glentoran. I saw him, I was there for his debut at Windsor, and I've seen quite a lot of them since. About the third time I watched them, I said to myself, David Healy might have to think about playing 2 up top to get the absolute best out of Robbie here. You couldn't fault him for industry at all, but he needs to get a goal soon. I think it's like 9 games or something like that without a goal, maybe more now, maybe 10 now. If he gets his confidence just about getting a goal or 2 under his belt, what we saw there, he hit the crossbar there from 6 yards out against Carrick last Sunday, and that's probably indicative of a player who's maybe not as high in confidence as he would like.
And you know what? We're the type of blokes that are just making it worse for him. And one man who knows what it's like to be in this position was Andrew Waterworth, and he didn't absolutely get off to a flyer with Linfield, albeit there was a bit of an injury, and he knew that making that move, there's a lot of stick going your way, and there's that extra pressure put on you. And yeah, it hasn't absolutely come together for him, but I think you're right about maybe the change, because right now Linfield are very much playing the 2 wide man and the one up top, and at the minute Devine looks like the person that fits that role the most, because he just is like this big log hammer at the top. He can bring the ball down and take in these wide men like Cooper, and perhaps maybe a 2 is the answer. But then maybe what they've got going here is the right formation. It's really tough for him because he's shown what he can do, and he just wants to make good and make right. And we all know sometimes from even our level of playing a bit of football, sometimes if you want it too much, you're just going to get caught up. You're going to be thinking too much, and he needs to get that instinct again. And we've seen how other players are able to do that in the league. I wanted to quickly talk about, you had a chat with Grant McCann, spoke out for David Healy and said feels for him and it's time to pick himself up. And I thought there in the middle of that game on Thursday, what will be the future of David Healy if Linfield get into Europe? And I guess he looks at someone like Grant McCann and go, perhaps that's where he wants to move on. And look, it hasn't come his way, but David Healy finished the season defiant and somewhat, maybe frustrated is not the word, but there was a fire in him and he felt there was people he needed to prove them wrong. For David, there is clearly some things to achieve, but is there potentially a way you could see him finding his way out of the league? Or does he need to nail something down like a big catch, like a qualifying for Europe?
Qualifying for Europe probably would have helped, as it did Michael O'Neill at Shamrock Rovers many years ago. It's a very interesting one about David Healy. David Healy, and it wasn't really any surprise to me, what he said at the end of the season, because David Healy's entire raison d'etre is to prove people wrong. He gets a kick out of it. He feeds off it. That's what drives him, looking out for people saying Linfield are rubbish or this or that or Healy's no good or whatever. He feeds off it. He thrives on it. It burns him up and he's like, I'm going to prove that such and such wrong. Like, that's David. He's on a mild level aggressive that way. I don't mean physically, obviously. He's very, very determined. His future, David has made it clear. I mean, going back a few years, David would have said, even when he was an international player, I want to be Northern Ireland manager someday. That was probably high up or maybe the pinnacle of his dreams. Since he's been at Linfield, sort of bit of a roller coaster the first couple of years and then settled down, and he's proved himself, as I say, to be an excellent manager. Will he go across the water, Peter? Unfortunately, there aren't a host of clubs battering his door down at the minute. Now, that's, and I do think that sometimes, you know, there's a bit of snootiness and snobbery in football across the water. Well, in fairness now, in the Premiership and even the Championship, the owners of these clubs are now American or Middle Eastern or whatever, they're looking to Europe. They're not looking at Northern Ireland for players or managers by and large. And I think, much as Michael O'Neill suffered that way as well when he was manager of Northern Ireland, I think David's suffering from that as well. There are one or two people that might tell you that maybe David knows how cutthroat it is in England in club management. And it's something that I was indeed talking to Grant about last week, because he's a real survivor and has thrived in both the Championship and League One. If you leave Linfield, or like Michael O'Neill, he leaves Northern Ireland for Stoke, and it was a very shrewd move because, okay, Stoke had a bloated squad, but they were chunked up already, and it was good wage for Michael, and he bided his time and he got a good club. But just looking at it coldly and objectively, where does Michael O'Neill go now? The point I'm trying to say is, if you go over across the water and maybe don't hit the ground running for whatever reason, and it could be pure bad luck or ownership problems or bad board, or you don't get on with the chairman, for whatever reason, if you don't hit the ground running and you're perceived as a failure, well, you're further behind, than when you first started out as such. I don't know this, but I wonder, is David now thinking, hold on a second, maybe I've got more here at Linfield than I first appreciated. Winning titles, getting into Europe. He does want to get the group stages, definitely. And, that combined with, as I say, not a queue of clubs looking to get him, which is a surprise and very disappointing. I think actually David's a bit disappointed privately himself. He wouldn't admit it publicly, but I think he would feel that privately. And the thing that I was surprised about is all the noises coming from him and suggestions are, Peter, that if there was a vacancy at the international level, be it next month, next year, whenever, it wouldn't be for him. And I was astonished, by that, Peter. Absolutely astonished. Now, people have said to me, but if he was offered it, he wouldn't turn it down. He seems fairly resolute in the fact that he's not going to be a successor to Ian Barclough. And you can read into that what you want, whether it's his happiness at, I would possibly suggest that that's maybe more to do with he sees what way the squad is with Johnny Evans and Stephen Davis due to retire,
That's really interesting because you hit on a point I wanted to make. This is the week now. Michael O'Neill has now been relieved of his duties at Stoke, and a lot of outpouring of people saying how he had such a difficult job there to really completely reform that club, who was bloated and was really in a lot of fixing, and he kept that team in the Championship, and they kept them moving towards some sort of normality. In the end, the owners want to change the direction, and he's now eventually going to be on the lookout. And I guess the first thing Northern Ireland fans are saying is, come on home, Michael. And, that is not fair on Ian Barclough, albeit he is facing a tough job himself. But for O'Neill, there's no real place where you go, well, he'll find a job here or he'll find a job there. It feels like Scotland's probably a destination for him, that they would maybe take him in and he could kind of show what he can do there. But it's tough for people like him in that situation, because you're right, as much as we can see players going from the Irish League over to full-time football in England, that is a road which has been more open than ever before. It's not happening with managers. So Grant McCann is a different case. Grant McCann was someone who was just so connected to Peterborough, and that's why he was given that chance. And, he went on to Hull, and he's had to deal with sometimes the erratic nature of owners at clubs, and maybe that is something David Healy looks at and goes, I don't want to uproot and then get caught in some sort of drama at a lower league club. But we are in a situation now where who is the next in line if it isn't going to be Barclough taking this team forward long term? It feels like O'Neill's a bit of a pipe dream for Northern Ireland fans, but you never know.
Michael O'Neill at Stoke City, yes. Michael took his time and got the right job. Stoke, Bet365 Stadium, very successful family-owned club. Plenty of money about it. Unfortunately, they had a lot of high-earning players from their Premier League days that they couldn't move on. Yes, that's a problem that a number of managers face, Peter. But I do have to say that I think, Michael was there 3 years almost in November, I think it was. So for me, that's plenty of time. He got probably more time than most managers. I don't know. I don't know what was going on behind the scenes. If there was anything, I think actually Stoke maybe released one statement early on last Thursday, and then released another one, sort of thanking him for his services. Is he going to come back to manage Northern Ireland, you're asking? Not a mission in my book. Michael's stock is very, very high in Northern Ireland. Why would he want to come back and possibly tarnish his legacy? I know we want it. All Northern Ireland fans would want him back, but it's simply not feasible, not practical. Some have suggested that he might come home. He sees his future eventually as being like a chief executive of a club or an association such as the Irish FA. He studied for that. That probably will happen somewhere down the line, yes. But Michael's in a bit of a bind at the minute because I don't think he's going to want to walk away from English football management, club management, deemed as a failure. Michael, as a player, Peter, left Coleraine for Newcastle as a 16-year-old wunderkid. He was a superstar. He was meant to be the next big thing. He was a good player. Either he feels that he may be underachieved in his playing career, or possibly more likely, he is perceived to have underachieved. I know that Michael felt he should have had more Northern Ireland caps. So I don't think, I think it was part of his motivation to do well in management because, he didn't do as well as he wanted to as a player. So where does he go now? I wouldn't rule out possibly America. Yeah, Michael loves the American way of life. His brother used to live in Chicago, and Michael would have visited him once every year. And he has said that he's told me certainly that's years ago he's told me that's something he would really fancy. He likes new experiences, new life experiences. He's not always about you have to stay in England or Scotland. He's like, why not? Why not operate in America or the continent? I don't know what his French or Spanish is like now, Peter. So he might be a bit restricted there. Thinking about it, and I have thought about this quite a bit. I wouldn't rule out Scotland, possibly if the right club came up for him. I don't think he would take just any club in Scotland. I don't think he's going to get Rangers or Celtic imminently. So I don't know. You're maybe looking at the next clutch of clubs in Scotland that he might look at if the opportunity arose. It's an interesting one for Michael, and it's one we're going to watch closely, but I don't think he's going to return to Northern Ireland.
I completely agree. I just feel it was something that had to be asked, had to be said, because I've seen it all online. I also don't think, I'm sure there's plenty of cases, but you don't want to go back. You want to move forward, and you want to give it a go and try new things. And look, it's unfortunate. I think I know what you're alluding to in Stoke. Ultimately, it's probably recruitment was a thing that let him down, and he just didn't find those gems. And now he's in a world where the Northern Ireland 2016 achievement, and even more so the Shamrock Rovers won, that's in the distance. It's about moving forward. There's a vacancy up in Dundee, if that's going to be a swift move, but I know exactly what you mean. I think there's another chapter for him, and he'll want to prove that what Stoke was a blip, and he'll want to really prove himself. And not to go into this quagmire, but I just feel I have to ask when you're here. Barclough is feeling under pressure, and I've sat there and thought, and we talked about the idea of maybe David Healy, that could be his step up to the promised land. And if it wasn't to be Barclough at the end of this set of qualification, do you have a wee notion in your mind who could be the next man looking after the Green and White Army? Is it someone like Grant McCann? Is it maybe a Neil Lennon, let's say? I know he'd be a controversial one, but is there someone you go, don't keep your eye out for them? They could be the next person to take the reins there.
Well, the first thing I might have to say, perhaps mischievously, is that who I think should get the job and who the IFA maybe think should get the job are two completely different things. So moving ahead, Ian Barraclough, I don't think he's going to do, I have to say. The Nations League in June was a disaster. And I personally probably would have moved then, to get a new manager in, to get the couple of Nations League games for a feel for the get a feel for the squad and the players moving forward. Well, certainly. I mean, I think it's quite clear that the IFA and its current guys have an eye for a pound. They're very much more a business. They like to be corporate nowadays. They like, it's like there's a lot of focus on finance at the Irish FA at the minute. That's a fact. You're asking me who I would like to see if Ian were to step down or be relieved. Grant McCann's an obvious one, yes, but I don't think Grant's interested at the minute. Certainly, the last time I spoke to him about this, I think it was last year. He's very polite and but just said clear, not just at the minute. I would have thought it would have been ideal for David Healy, Peter, but I'm shocked and stunned that he has sort of said, or he's maybe suggested that it's not for him at the minute. You don't get these opportunities that often in life. So, I mean, the last time around, to be quite frank, Peter, I probably would have chosen some of the other candidates over Ian Barraclough, and that's not to do Ian Barraclough down. I thought Tommy Wright would have been an excellent Northern Ireland manager. I think the IFA wanted a safer pair of hands. So, what would they do now? Who knows? It depends what their budget would be. Could they afford a Grant McCann? Would they be willing to pay the sort of money that Michael O'Neill was on at the end, which was 800 grand a year? No is the answer, Peter. We'll just have to see and hope that, the IFA can get something right.
And I will say this, as many people pointed this out as well, Michael O'Neill had his bad run. Barraclough is definitely having a bad run. I don't think that can be denied. I think it's gone beyond the early days of Michael O'Neill. But right now, it's Ian Barraclough's job, and he's got a few games at least to try and prove he is the man moving forward. We return to league action, and we go to Solitude. Cliftonville keep letting goals in, but they're getting away with it by scoring enough to get the results. And it just seems so strange because at the back was such a strength for them, and now they're relying on their forwards to get them out of a hole. That's all good when you're knocking them in. They're not looking like they're going to stop knocking them in at any point. And I know they're missing Levi Ives, but that's a slight concern. 4-2 against Dungannon. I'm sure they would have rather be sitting with a win without those 2 goals in the column of Dungannon.
Yes, Peter, I was at Solitude on Saturday for a thoroughly entertaining game. It was like, I mean, Paddy McLaughlin alluded to it afterwards. It was like basketball, if you were in the crowd, you'd have thought you were at Wimbledon. You were just going like that, up and down, up and down, up and down. It was a very, very exciting game to watch, very open, expansive play. I don't think that Levi Ives, his absence can be underplayed. I think it's a massive blow to Linfield. To Cliftonville, excuse me. And bear in mind, they don't have Aaron Donnelly as backup now because he has now since departed for Larne and doing well there. Yeah, I noted that. I think Cliftonville have conceded 8 goals this season so far. When you compare that to Glentoran at the top of the table, who have only conceded 1 goal, that shows something now. Yes, you're absolutely right, Peter. Their firepower is awesome, and they'll be all right. I'll be interested to see if Paddy brings somebody in the transfer window. He has been linked with Aaron Trainer of Coleraine. Aaron is out injured at the minute, and he's had a wee bit of, I think it's a groin problem. It's been needling, and it may be a recurring injury. That would be my concern. So we'll have to see if Paddy plugs the gap there, or he continues to maybe play Luke Turner on the left. Also, there's a new goalkeeper. There are 2 new goalkeepers at Cliftonville this season, and it remains to be seen who will endure for the rest of the season. So a couple of minor issues to worry about there, but there's still a lot to like about Cliftonville. It's been spoken about before, Joe Gormley and Chris Curran started on the bench on Saturday. They came off the bench and they were superb when they came off. They combined beautifully for a smashing goal by Chrissy Curran, cut inside in the right channel and, jinked left and right, created space and then fired low into the far corner. Yeah, they're very exciting. Can they sustain it like last season, Cliftonville? Will they go? Will they take it to the last day? I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. I kind of think this division. I think Linfield are going to be there. I just admire Linfield so much. I think last year was their year to be got at. So they're more secure this year, and I kind of think that maybe Coleraine had a disappointing season last year. I think they may be resurgent. I think Larne are going to be very good this season, Peter. I'll happily talk about them. Um, Crusaders have the team to challenge and won the Irish Cup last year, but they're inconsistent at times. They can't seem to sustain long periods of victories without a reversal. Sometimes I think they get into the comfort zone a wee bit, and deck chairs and cigars, and then they get a slap in the jaw. It's everything to play for, but with Cliftonville. An interesting thing, Peter, if you don't mind me sort of not meandering too much, but like Cliftonville signed Ronan Hale from Larne, an excellent player, and Paul O'Neill went in the other direction. And I thought it was excellent business by Larne, I must say, because you're now looking at a partnership up front of Paul O'Neill and Lee Bonus, and I think that is very, very formidable indeed. If the two of them can remain, free from injury and don't get suspended. I voiced my surprise to people at Solitude over the summer. Why'd you let Paul O'Neill go? And it was sort of suggested, well, he's only scored one goal. And on paper, that's fair enough. But bear in mind, he didn't get a lot of chances because of the embarrassment of riches that Paddy has up front. It's a judgment call, Peter. I like Paul O'Neill. I've always liked him as a player. I liked him. He made the step up to Northern Ireland under 21s and took it absolutely in a stride. Scored a couple of goals, I think. And I think he'll be a smasher. He's proven a smasher so far for Larne. They absolutely love him down there. And it'll be interesting to see. Not that there's a direct comparison, but I'll be keen to see who scores more goals this year, Ronan Hale or Paul O'Neill.
At the minute, both of them are smashing them in. And you said there what Paul O'Neill was up against. He was fighting for his place there within that Cliftonville front line, and it looks as though the difference right now in Larne is just that love and care and that belief. The baton is with him. Lynch has said, it's you and Lee. And if both those two players get firing, both under 25, both playing full-time football, and both have threatened to break out as the next big striker in the league. And if they can get those two guys working seamlessly, and right now, Paul O'Neill has found his run of form, getting 3 goals in the past 2 games. That's just a thing that can take Larne up towards the top of the table finally, because they've always threatened, but never menacingly. Now, albeit they haven't had any massive scalps just yet, they're starting to bring it all together. Thomas Cosgrove looked fantastic again against Ballymena, and we'll move to that game because there was plenty of talking points. And we talk about Paul O'Neill. He scored 2 on Friday. Should he have been on the pitch at all to score them? I'm talking about a 50-50 ball in the first half. It bounces in the box. Sean O'Neill, the goalkeeper for Ballymena, goes for the ball. Paul dives in for it. He ended up getting a yellow for it. But the Ballymena team and fans were incensed. They saw a high boot. They thought it was reckless. I thought it was reckless. What did you make of that challenge in particular?
Paul should have been sent off.
I agree.
No doubt about it for me. And I have a particular take on this, Peter. I love the physicality in football. I think it's there for a reason. We all like to see tackles. But I'm dead against something that could be dangerous to another player. And I have no doubt Paul didn't mean to do any damage at all. But it was dangerous in my opinion. I thought it was probably needless. And I do feel that the only way to stamp out this sort of dangerous play is by saying to a player, if you do that, you're getting a red card and sent off.
Look, the ball is there to be won. I get that. But it's a question over control. Yeah. It's a question over... It's reckless is the word that stands out to me. And the interesting point to this is that what it looks closest to from a tackle is the one where Jack Malone for Glenavon got sent off in a 50-50 against Paul O'Neill, so that was a red card. I think this is a red card. I don't think it was malicious. I don't think there was any vigor or nasty intent. But did he clip Sean O'Neill in the Ballymena goal potentially seemed to be bleeding afterwards. It just seemed reckless because he caught him in the face or around his upper torso area. So that could have ended very poorly. And unfortunately, I agree, it's a red card so that we don't get in a position where people are taking the risk in a situation like that.
Yeah, it was very like young Malone's red card for Glenavon, different part of the pitch near the halfway line. Young Malone, I think, he went to ground early and slid long, if you know what I mean. And unfortunately, then it's probably, where you end up is probably a little bit out of your control. I think he went down too early and too far away, but like Paul O'Neill, in my humble opinion, I thought it was a poor judgment call from him. I don't think he was ever likely to get the ball or without maybe endangering Sean O'Neill. Not that he meant to, it's just his hunger and his desire to do well. But you have to protect the players. I'm fairly adamant about that. And a more seasoned professional, I would say, possibly would know that it was a lost cause going into that, and there was no point. And that's okay. Keep your powder dry for the next one.
Well, in the end, the game finishes 3-0 to Larne against Ballymena. Ballymena don't finish with 11 men. Steve McCulloch seeing red for a challenge on Mark Randall. I thought this was a clear red. Maybe if you first see it, you don't go, oh, well, he just went in for the ball there. What makes it a red for me, and clearly in the eyes of the referee, was just how high that boot was and the studs going in to high on the calf. That's a potential leg breaker. And again, I don't think he's going in with a particular nasty intent, but it could have resulted in a very serious injury.
100% red card. 100%. Yes, initially I looked at it and went, oof, and didn't like that. But I looked at it again for this podcast, Peter, because you got to be fair. And I looked at it 2 or 3 times and definitely a red card. Again, I'm not sure he was realistically going to get the ball coming at it the way he did. And just his tackle was a bit high. And I think it caught him, Mark Randall, sort of like on the calf or thereabouts, didn't it? And the referee got that one right. And I don't think Davy Jeffrey complained too much about it afterwards. I think what he was complaining about was exactly what you were talking about earlier on, the lack of consistency between young Malone sending off and Paul O'Neill's none, only a yellow card for him. He's 100% right in my book.
For Ballymena, the first half seemed to flow okay for them. David McDade with their best chance at popping up for him in the 6-yard box. It's kind of a bit high. He really should have buried it, and it would have been a different game at that point, but he doesn't. He just snatched at it. It was easy picked up by Larne. Interesting to hear boos for Leroy Miller for Larne. Ballymena fans, as much as he was a hero, clearly they somewhat soured by him moving on and the nature of that. I really was hyped up about Ballymena at the start of the season. I thought they had the stature of player to really progress and change things, and I thought they would have the firepower up top, but it's up top which just doesn't seem to be clicking at the minute. Doesn't seem to be getting the goals that will propel them out of this purgatory of above in the bottom half but not even scratching top 6. It's probably too early to be worried and concerned, but there is murmurs of frustration around the Ballymena fan base, it's fair to say.
Sometimes I think you've got to be realistic about your expectations. Let's talk about Ballymena's realistic expectations. Are they going to win the league? No. Are they going to finish top 4? No. Are they going to finish top 6? Possibly. But they've a lot of work to do. Same as Glenavon, same as Carrick Rangers, same as Dungannon Swifts if they want to try and reach. It's very, very difficult now, with the structures in place and the money that's available. I suppose you could look to Coleraine and Cliftonville for bucking the trend in recent years. Yeah, that's fair enough. Cliftonville's recruitment was superb, and Coleraine have got an excellent manager in Owen Kearney who keeps working the oracle there. I have to say, Peter, I wasn't expecting fireworks from Ballymena this season. I don't think they did enough work in the window. I think they made some decent signings. Yes, okay. They've got David McDade and David Parkhurst up front on paper. That should be a great partnership. I think losing Leroy Miller was massive. I have to say. I know that Davy made Josh Kelly as captain. Um, you know, Leroy is a player I have great admiration for, I must say. And you're talking about him getting booed. I wouldn't lay claim to knowing Leroy well, but I have interviewed him. I have interviewed him, and I think he's a very strong lad mentally. So I think he'll take that in his stride, no problem whatsoever. But you know, I'm not trying to be disparaging about Ballymena, but I recognise where they are, you know, and what their limitations are. They don't have some of the money to throw about like some of the other clubs, and some of the other clubs are throwing about some quite decent cabbage, you know, and not even the full-time clubs. It may be that they might have to look. I don't want to say it again, you know, because I know that you're talking about trauma earlier on. They might look for another Irish Cup run, you know.
Oh dear.
I know, but that is, I mean, for a lot of people around Ballymena, that's like a lot of people in Ballymena would want to win the Irish Cup more than the Irish League, if you know what I mean, because there's such a history of it, you know, and sort of it's a sort of romantic notion about it, you know, the big day out and the sky blue on the cup. But it is frustrating for Ballymena. It is frustrating for Gary Hamilton. I was talking to Gary recently, and he has more than once expressed his frustration with how difficult it is to get good players in these days. So I'm afraid that I think Ballymena may be more frustrated this season.
Well, and I wasn't disparaging the Irish Cup there. I feel like I was
You did laugh
recoiling.
though.
I did. Well, I recoiled for the Ballymena fans because I'm reminded of David Jeffrey on the opening day of the season, just going, "It's happened again. It's happened again. Last minute drama again." I'm sure David Healy's thinking, "Last minute drama again. Please get out of my conscience. It's just haunting him." So I just feel for Ballymena fans thinking an Irish Cup and it could all end poorly. Look, I think they could turn it around. And you were talking there about what many people mark as their cohort friends, their potential dance partner as they tiptoe around the top six, Glenavon. What a statement win. I know it's early. What a statement win for Gary Hamilton up at the showgrounds. 3-1 and well worth their win there. When you pin it all together, it was bad luck against Larne. They almost got a draw with 9 men. This is the first game of the season where they ended with 11 men. They got a draw out of nowhere through fight and a bit of luck again against Ballymena. I have been hyping up Coleraine. I've seen them live this season, and I really thought there's 2 really excellent teams. It's Coleraine and it's Linfield. And yes, it's only 1 result, but Glenavon won that game outright. There's no doubt about it. And this is with missing 4 players due to suspension. He could be picking together. He could be sewing together, Gary Hamilton, a team that could surprise people. But inconsistency has been their problem. It was their problem last season, and maybe this is just going to be the boom and bust nature. Who impressed you in that game?
Well, the real Glenavon, please stand up. It's true. We've been saying this for a while. They're mercurial. They're built in the mold of their manager, Gary Hamilton, who's as canny can be. Who impressed me? Who has impressed me? Peter Campbell. You know, I'm a huge fan of Peter Campbell. I would almost admit to being very covetous of Peter Campbell. You know, and Gary has said time and time again, hands off, you know. I think he's got a bright future in the game. I actually expected Glenavon to do better this year, Peter. Again, are they going to win the league? No. Are they going to challenge for Europe? Maybe, you know, through the European playoffs. But I did expect more. They were kind of unfortunate last year with Andrew Waterworth that it just didn't happen for him at all. So they were down, you know, an excellent goal scorer. Gary's talking about this young fella Isaac Baird now, and you know, raving about him. I was surprised that they beat Coleraine now, because I thought Coleraine, like yourself, were really, really, really good. It remains to be seen. I think Coleraine have maybe adjusted their style of play a little bit now that they've got a truer surface to play on with a 3G pitch. Whether that works for them, you know, they're doing well so far, 9 points so far. So it augurs well. But yes, it's amazing what you can do with 11 players in the pitch, Peter, isn't it? So I expect good stuff from Glenavon. But again, they're hampered, you know, by what they can bring in and who they can bring in and what they can spend. So I don't expect them to break any delft in the league campaign,
And
unfortunately.
I'm sure it's only fair for me to say Glenavon have had the runabout of Coleraine recently. I don't think Coleraine have got a win against Glenavon pre-pandemic. And the one thing I've been saying on this podcast is that as much as they are so exciting and they're so frenetic and they're a pulsating team to watch, Coleraine, they can't and they will not be able to keep that up for 90 minutes. They just cannot do it. And I've seen in some games they've played, as much as they look as the most exciting team in the league, the most dangerous team in the league, coming from out wide, Lee Lynch pushing in midfield, Shevlin just being this Fowler, Owen type player that just finds the right spot. And he's got a bit of physicality to him too. There's been times in games where they've let the other team onto them. And, no matter how fit they are, you will see, I think, as it goes on, Owen Kearney rotate that team. And he's got the players to do it. He's got the likes of McKendry on the bench, McCrudden, James McLaughlin's still there, Andrew Mitchell. But he can't run that team into the ground. And I think Glenavon had only played 2 games by that time on Friday night. That was Colerane's third game in a week, 6 days. And they pretty much kept the same team they have had from the opening game. I think maybe a bit of tiredness just let them down, and they will come back and they'll go again, no doubt. But you mentioned this, and I have to point this out. This is my little snippet of the week. There is praising a player, and then there's praising player and throwing a bit of shade at your rivals.
So I want to pay credit to every one of the players tonight, but I want to give a special mention to young Isaac Bird, 18 years of age. He's been outstanding from pre-season, from the first match against St Pat's. Every game he's played, he's been outstanding. Every training session, he's been outstanding. And probably if he had been an experienced player, I would have expected him to come and knock my door and ask why he hasn't played yet. But he's a young player. He knows that he's getting given a great opportunity at the club. He couldn't even get anywhere near Portadown's first team. I don't know how that's the case, but he couldn't. But as I say, he's obviously come to us, from the very first night. We've put him in the training with the first team, and if we had been able to get him before the window, he would have been in the first team squad every week last year as well.
And that's the way to do it. My player was brilliant, but I don't know how he didn't get into Portadown. That's a tiny bit of shade there from the Glenavon manager, and he did it with a little sparkle in his eye. He knew what he was doing, but perhaps they found another star player in Isaac Bird, a teenage player playing in centre midfield. He'll need players like that if they're going to try and fulfill their ambitions this season, won't they?
People talk about there aren't characters in the game anymore, and I think that's a silly thing to say, Peter. I think human beings are human beings, and every generation has characters. Rockets, sometimes, as we call them now and again. Is Gary a rocket? No, not now anymore, probably, but he had his moments when he was younger, yeah. But I'll tell you this, he's people, it takes a wise man to act the aged. And Gary Hamilton, his knowledge of football is astonishing. It really is. I mean, I would have spoken to Gary, about, you mention any player in the league and he'll know where he came from, what's his best position, strengths and weaknesses. The man just loves football. He's like David Healy and most of us. But there's some people who just live football day in, day out. That's Gary. Again, it's about realistic ambitions. And do players get frustrated with a sort of a ceiling being placed on their aspirations? Do managers get frustrated with it? Can it become tedious for a manager? I don't know. But again, I'll have to say, I think Glenavon and Ballymena, I think they would both probably say, Peter, that they're going for cup runs and to get into Europe through the playoff. Such is the quality and the calibre of opposition.
They've got plenty to go for. And by the time you're listening to this, Glenavon could have got another win against Newry, and they go and they've got Carrick on Saturday. That could be 6 points. Or, like you said, inconsistent Mercurial Glenavon, they could be sitting here just where they are again, in the middle, and we'll just have no clue what team Glenavon are going to turn up week to week. Hello there, it is slightly in the future Peter here, but mainly completely in the past Peter to all of you. Yes, we were right, just as predicted. Glenavon somehow had a complete role reversal and got beat 5-1 on Tuesday evening against Newry City at home, proving they are still as confusing as a 16-sided Rubik's Cube. Just when you thought you had it figured out, it's completely the other way and you're baffled. You're not quite sure if you're close to understanding what's going on or not. Regardless, what does that mean for Glenavon? We don't know. All we know is that Newry won 5-1. They are the quote-unquote big 3 points. They count as much as other 3 points. But well done, Newry. You're off the mark. And what a performance. I've said you were going to score goals, and you saved them all up and scored them in one game. Fair play. We'll take a trip down to the Newry Showgrounds, a place that's seen some exciting games so far this season, but none which have resulted in a home victory. Newry are scaring teams, and they've been playing against the better, bigger teams in this league. It wasn't meant to be. Crusaders eventually found their openings. They took the 3 points up to North Belfast. It's another example in the space of a week. I haven't really tackled too much of what happened in game week 3 there on Tuesday night past, but that's 2 somewhat scares if you're a Crusaders fan, going 1 goal down against lower opposition. And particularly up until Sunday, we were living in a scenario, albeit it's early days, where not one team from last season's bottom 6 had beaten any team in the top 6. Now, Carrick is now the outlier, but if Crusaders have top-of-the-table ambition, and I know they do, they wouldn't want to have it as close as it's been. Portadown one's interesting because they were 1-0 down to 10 men, and for the preceding, whatever it was, 60 minutes, they were able to win out against a Portadown side. I think that says more about Portadown than potentially Crusaders. But then Crusaders go to Newry. Again, not a particularly great goal they give away to Newry. And then, much like how Linfield has had to face against a lot of the teams in this division, Newry sat back, let them come at them, were tight, and Crusaders didn't have this open back line to run at. They had to somehow break down Newry, knowing that Newry have plenty of players who could have punished them on the counter. Lorcan Ford, McGovern, Hughes. But they got there in the end, and a bit like the game on Tuesday at Seaview, a set piece came to their rescue, giving them a goal in both games. Do you see this as getting away with it for Crusaders, or showing that this team is built to face adversity?
But both, Peter, would probably, without getting splinters in my backside, people will probably know my allegiances are with aforementioned North Belfast side. So, wearing my supporters hat, I do get frustrated sometimes with the lack of consistency. Sometimes the fact that, Crusaders do, like Stevens sometimes does have to throw on, empty the benches and throw absolutely everything at it in the latter stages. He showed he can do that. But why go a goal behind in the first place? Why, like against, the Crusaders lost against Glentoran. It's their only defeat. And I thought Ben Kennedy went off injured. And I thought that Crusaders really lacked a focal point up front. And that seems to be a recurring problem for Stephen pretty much since Jordan Owens, not saying he went off the ball, but since he wasn't maybe as available as often. I think Stephen has struggled a little bit with strikers. He bought Adam Leckie and he signed Johnny McMurray, and they seem to have fallen out of favour. He was playing Ben Kennedy up front. Dean Ebbe, was kind of hoped to have been a bit of a stellar signing for Crusaders. Larne and other clubs were looking at him, and he is yet to find his feet. So I think Crusaders have to iron out that problem. People have been clamouring for Johnny McMurray to play a bit more, and I would say absolutely that's fair. But that's a wee problem for Crusaders. I do get a little bit frustrated. I do think that Crusaders have a team and a squad that, if they're not challenging for the title, they should be going close. But I do get a bit frustrated at the lack of consistency. And I do sometimes think that, that there's a sort of, sometimes there may be a temptation to drop into the comfort zone, get a few good results, and then bang, be left with a bloody nose against somebody like Dungannon Swifts or Ballymena, Glenavon, something like that, So now, in fairness, to talk about Newry, they also have James Taylor up front, a very lively little striker as well. So goals shouldn't be a real problem. I think the problem was when Newry that they ran out of steam somewhat last Saturday at the showgrounds. It will be a concern to Darren Mullen that they haven't got any points on the board because, you're kind of hoping, Peter, if you win the championship last year as Newry did, you're winning games more often than you're not. Everybody's up, everybody's enjoying the game, confidence is high, and you would like to keep that momentum going into the top flight, into the new season. And I was kind of thinking that from Darren's point of view, who, by the way, I think is a magnificent manager. Um, I think he might have been hoping to get points on the board early to give them a bit of a cushion or a bit of a head start, because we have seen in recent seasons some teams get up, do well, and then get sucked back in.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying there. You do want to take that momentum, and as soon as the questions start appearing in players' minds, you don't want that, I've got to hang on here. You want to have that sort of confidence of, we can go into this game, we can win. We're used to winning, and I think you can see with Portadown and Dungannon, at times in the top flight, they've forgotten how to win, or they struggle to get back up, and to not have a game or two there where they can get the early points, I think, I agree, it's a difficulty for Newry, but I do think they have the attacking talent, similar to the way that Carrick has the attacking talent to get goals. They're absolutely going to concede them. There's no doubt about that, but it's just going to be something that can help them get the odd statement win here or there that can help them collect the points. That's what Warren Point didn't have. They didn't have Swan or Sullivan really nicking those goals and keeping them up. And I think Newry might have the players to do that. And they are exciting when they're going forward. I want to go back to Crusaders though, because you talked about Jordan Owens up top and how do you replace him. Maybe this is a bit harsh of me to say, but have they got a backup plan? Are they too rigid to the one idea? Is that maybe where they're being found out? Because you say they can't find a replacement for Jordan Owens, and I'm not a Crusaders fan, but is the question not, well, how can we make it work with what we've got? Because I didn't think, back to that Glentoran game, in the second half, yes, Glentoran go ahead and then the game shifts, but it didn't feel like Crusaders had a plan B in that situation.
Yeah, that's a fair comment, Peter. That accusation has been levelled at Crusaders and Stephen Baxter on and off for a while now. Crusaders are a team that did well, came from nowhere, and were top dogs, won the title 3 years. And of course, when you're top dogs and you're winning, everybody else hates you and wants to beat you, So there's always a bit of schadenfreude, when Crusaders maybe struggle.
Love it.
That's what I call David Healy, by the way, Dr. Schadenfreude, but that's another matter. It's a bit unfair to say the Crusaders are just a Route 1 team, and Stephen would reject that. And if you look at Paul Heatley and Gavin White previously, and Stuart Dallas going back even further again, but to keep it current. Flip side, if you're being honest, Stephen struggled to replace Colin Coates, and the central defensive partnership was a wee bit all at sea for a while. Struggled to replace Jordan Owens. It seems that he's sort of looking for somebody, a replica of Jordan Owens at times. I was very disappointed to see Jamie McGonigal leave Crusaders. Again, it's a judgment call and a judgment call only. I think Jamie McGonigal is an absolutely smashing. From the day I saw him, the first season I saw him, people were talking about that clutch of young players up in the North Coast. I did say I don't think Jamie McGonigal will get across the water, but I think he'll be an absolutely top drawer local player. And so it has proved, bar Crusaders. If you can't get a good goal scorer out of Jamie McGonigal, there's questions must be asked. I mean, Stephen is trying to play a different way with some success now. Ben Kennedy and Paul Heatley were superb at the start of the season. Paul has continued that. It's just about whether you can contain that, sustain that throughout the course and distance of the season campaign. In recent years, we have seen the Crusaders have been better in the Cups than the league.
And my final question on Crusaders, just when I have someone that follows it a lot closer than I do. Keith Bailey was on the podcast last week. He talked of his concern about finances in the league. I'm not quite sure where it is right now, but there's been talk of a takeover at Crusaders. What is the situation there? And do you think Crusaders fans should have a air of concern? Is this a healthy move? Is it a sustainable move? And is it even likely to happen?
How many questions that you're firing at me about Crusaders now, Peter?
It was my final six, all wrapped up in one big bow.
Full disclosure, I'm also a member and a bond holder of Crusaders. So I have been at all the meetings in which this potential takeover has been discussed. A lot of people sort of see it sort of one-dimensionally and think it's a buyout and Crusaders are only getting such and such, injection, the cash injection to sort of boost their transfer kitty. It's not all about money, really. It's about a vision for the future. And I know a lot of people outside Crusaders are very sceptical that I did listen to Keith on the pod last week. I have to say that Ards then, as was, because I was reporting on that situation, because I'm a lot older than Keith, and Crusaders' situation, they're two totally different situations indeed. There has been a hitch in the potential buyout. The last that I was aware of it or looked into it, there was a query about tax liabilities with the takeover. My understanding is that the club took advice on the matter from tax experts, and my understanding is what I was told was that one tax expert said there will be no tax liability, and another tax expert says you could be liable to up to 25% tax, which is a sizable amount of money. So that is where we're at the minute. I'm expecting a meeting soon to discuss it. Will it go ahead? I probably think it will, Peter. Well, again, I don't know. I'll have to find out if there is a 25% tax liability or not. And then it's possible the deal might collapse. It's possible they might try and see if they can go about it another way. From what I understand, Peter, Perry Shopper is very, very keen indeed. He has been very proactive with Crusaders throughout the close season. Ian Rush is very excited about it. And I'll just give you a wee bit of insight, if you don't mind, Peter. Again, Schadenfreude a corner. People outside Seaview were cock a hoop when this takeover was announced or mooted and talked about, and they pointed to the two previous instances where it didn't work out. Iran bought over two clubs in England, and then there was a bit of a squealing match between the old club, and they felt they were unfairly treated. From another perspective, I know that really hurt Ian Rush because he's a very decent man. I'm not a Liverpool fan, by the way, so again, total disclosure, but he's a very decent man who took that very, very badly. The fact that, his character was being brought into question, and I simply don't think he would want to go through that again. So I do think that the owners are genuine. I do think they're not looking to, I guess this talk about, building apartments or houses is pretty much ludicrous, I think it's an honest endeavour. Whether it goes through, we will have to see.
Fascinating insight, Stephen. I appreciate you peeling back the curtain ever so slightly, and that is a story which will be fascinating as it moves forward. And we will wrap up the last game of Game Week 4 in the Irish League. It was on TV. It was officially under the lights eventually, as we sadly descend into autumn. At Shamrock Park, Glentoran easily beat Portadown, and they did it with aplomb. McMenamin looks fantastic, as he does, albeit Portadown didn't really make them work for it. The goals came from probably being a bit too far away from the players. A bit of closing down could have helped in the situation, but Glentoran won at a canter, and now they're sitting atop the league.
Glory days, take the photographs of the cranes, get the red, black and green on the Gibson Cup. I'm being slightly tongue-in-cheek there. I have to say, though, again, there's a lot of, like Glentoran is a colourful story. Let's make no bones about it. There's not a dull moment in East Belfast, and never has been, certainly since McDermott took over. He needed a good start, Peter. Let's be clear about that.
Absolutely.
He things went badly wrong for Glentoran at the end of last season. We know there was a Joe Crow registration issue. Did that blow Glentoran off course? It certainly didn't help. I've said before, I think, bombing Robbie McDade was a mistake. Things went wrong anyway, and the fans were not happy at all. In fact, many of them were furious and were dead set against Mick. Knowing what, I've been there for the infamous car park protests over different years, and I've said elsewhere that nobody kills their darlings like they do in East Belfast. So Mick was under pressure, a bad start, and you can bet your bottom dollar there would have been vocal discontent at the Oval. But hey, it's a results game. I think you said that at the head of the discussion, Peter. They've got the results. They drew against Larne. I think that might turn out to be a very valuable point. It was a cagey game, first game of the season. Both clubs didn't want to lose, and then they've won 3 in a spin. And as I say, only conceded 1 goal. Aidan Wilson has been an excellent signing, as anticipated. People at Glentoran were asking me, what's this Aidan Wilson like? I didn't want to see him leave Crusaders. And he's exactly what Mick McDermott wants. Mick McDermott wants players imbued with a professional full-time spirit and background who know what it takes to be dedicated, to turn up for training, to lead a good lifestyle, to eat well, to be professional. That's what he wants around the club. He hasn't always got it. But he's got it in Aidan Wilson, that's for sure. And there's a lot to like. I have to say as well, I do like Ali Roy since he's come in, maybe filling in for Robbie McDade, wide right of a 3. There will be reversals this season, of course. Believe it or not, I have a reasonable relationship with Mick McDermott. We've had a rouse now. We've had a couple of proper ding-dongs, but I have a high regard for the man. That might sound strange to some people, but if you actually listen to him and give him a chance to speak, and you sort of say, you put things to him, there's often a very, very good rationale. There's some things I disagree with about his stewardship, Peter. I think he's chopped and changed too much. I think he's brought too many players to the club at times, sometimes the wrong caliber of player, particularly the midfield for me. I think he needs to get a more settled midfield. He's tried a lot of things over the last 3 years with varying degrees of success.
It's about consistency, and so far they're racking these wins up. I think you're right about centre midfield. It's the one area where I just don't see the true dominance. I can't see how it all comes together. Singleton's finding his feet there, and they've got the 3 up top right now. Maybe Roy comes in there, and they can only beat what they've got in front of them. At the back, they're looking ferocious. Aidan Wilson, 3 man of the matches, I believe he's got from the club out of the 4 games. That's all you can do. You do it one by one, and I don't think there's a manager with more to prove this season than Mick McDermott. Portadown, and another game against one of the top teams in this division. They're not really getting a break. I don't know if there's anything else to be said. The past few weeks, it's just been this team is finding its feet. A lot of them aren't used to the league, and it's not working out. There's players playing in positions they're not used to. I think you could see there Stephen Taggart, as much as he's a sharp player, he's learning the right back position against some of the most dangerous wide men in the league. That Crusaders game is a tough one. That is a tough blow to be 1 man up on your opposition and to lose a game. Let's pretend that's a game of 60 minutes and you've got 11 and the other team's got 10. To lose that 2-0 literally that's a tough one to take. And I think that's the one thing where I've seen a few Portadown fans say, I don't mind. I think they would have rather got beaten 4-0, 11 against 11, than lose in that manner. They go on, and I don't think we can say anything more about Portadown and that team until they play against a non-top 6 team. And from the one thing maybe I'd say about Friday night, Joe Moore looks tidy on the wing there, and they didn't have Jordan Jenkins, who seems to be their main striker at the minute, so time will tell there.
Obviously, I don't know the new faces that have arrived. I'm very much into character and mental strength in the game. It's okay being a fancy Dan player, doing your step overs and looking flash, but it's product that you need, and you need character to deliver product. I don't know these guys whether they're the sort of guys that you'd want to be in the ditches or in the trenches with, excuse me. So it remains to be seen. I mean, you're right, Peter. I think you could see little flickers here and there of something that maybe Paul can work on. I don't think he's a mug, Paul, at all. And again, I have to stress again the difficulty of recruitment. In the Irish League, no matter who if you're at the top end, managers are complaining, right, about getting players in and the cost of them. And I often speak to managers at the lower end, and they're sort of smiling, going, Haley's complaining about this and that and the other. Try being down here where we are, and it's a very valid point. Gary Hamilton told me there not so long back that not only like the star players are all sewn up, but because they might have potential resale value, even your decent players at clubs are now being signed up again in February. So it's very hard to pick up players coming out of contract on a free. So recruitment's been very, very difficult for Paul and Portadown. I expect improvement, Peter. I do think that these new players and this new Portadown team will improve. Will they improve enough remains to be seen. Do they have the appetite for the battle in the dark winter months, scrapping about in the relegation zone? because that's what it's all about. We'll have to wait and see.
I'm not condemning them to relegation, but right now you're not looking at a Dungannon or a Newry and saying, oh, well, Portadown will definitely catch them. I don't think it's as clear cut as that. And I did see...
I'm not sure.
I was at Anna against Loughgall there over the weekend, and I looked at a couple of those players, the likes of Callum Ferris for Loughgall, Marron for Anna United, who was tearing up trees for Armagh City the season before. And I think if I was a Portadown fan, I would go, where are these guys? Because they had Tantale up top against Glentoran, and yeah, he's new to the league, but he struggled. He struggled. I know it's against a very stingy back line, but he struggled, and it might take a while for Portadown until things get better.
Just briefly, I was going to say to you, I'm not too sure that I share your pessimism, believe it or not, Peter. I was impressed with Lee Upton.
Lee Upton is, not to slide into cliche territory, but he's an old school centre-half. He's a big lad, see ball, head ball, go. That's his strength. From some of the games I've seen, because I've looked at the goals that Portadown have conceded, maybe he's just not getting up to them, but then again, when you're shaking your boots, when you're seeing all these top players in the league pinging around, you can maybe get caught up and you're not exactly on your man. Young player at the centre of that defence. Paddy McNally is the real leader in that team. Leo Donnellan in centre midfield could be definitely a solid Irish League player from what I've seen. It's just about if they can do stuff up top. Will they find them by the time this podcast comes out and midnight on Wednesday? We'll have to see. But improvement required. We look ahead to game week 5 and this weekend, just the 2 games on Friday night, and we start with a massive clash at Seaview, Larne against Crusaders. It's live on TV if you'd like to watch it, and it could just flow either way. You spoke about splinters, a few splinters there, but I would probably just inch it to Larne. But so far, Crusaders have been rising to most of the challenges so far this season.
I probably wouldn't disagree with your analysis or feeling about how it's going to pan out. Again, I like Crusaders. They're a strong team, but they can sometimes be vulnerable, and sometimes discipline can be an issue for them. I just like Larne. I'm expecting better things from Larne. I'm expecting a good season from them. I think, Paul O'Neill, I think, will create problems with his quick feet. It's hard to know. To a lesser degree, Crusaders are almost a wee bit like Glenavon light, if you know what I mean, in terms of being mercurial or unpredictable. Not as unpredictable, but this is a sort of game I'm expecting Larne to maybe impress him. But then Crusaders could if Crusaders turn up and click, bang, like no team will stop them if they're on form and everybody's firing and it works out. I think this will be a tight enough game, a cagey game. If I was a betting man, which I am occasionally, very modest, it'd be, I don't know what the odds are. You'd be looking at maybe the odds for a draw or a bit of value in an away win.
Crusaders feel like the wily team who's been there, done that. A bit like with Glenavon. If Larne take home the 3 points here, regardless if it's just scraping at home, that's a statement win for them. That says we're here, we've arrived. I'm going to say just slightly 2-1 to Larne. I didn't get to talk too much about Dungannon. They welcome Coleraine to Stangmore, and they are still conceding goals like they did last season. As much as they're getting a few up top, I guess the one team you don't want to see coming down the road is Coleraine. This is a get-right game for Coleraine. I see Coleraine getting the goals just like they did against Portadown and Carrick as well. I think this is another chance for Shevlin to shine.
You would think so, yeah. I like Dean, what he's doing as a manager. Believe it or not, I don't really, I'm not a big fan of this. You have to play it out from the back and you have to, wheel it out to your fullbacks and move it through the thirds. I'm not a huge advocate of that. But I do see something in Dean Shields' ability, eye for talent and bringing in young players. He's been crippled by the loss of Dara McBride, and also Darren Cole to a lesser degree. He has got a clutch of fairly, I like that. There's a lot to like about Dungannon, not only just the way they play, I like Ben Gallagher, but maybe some down there think he's not consistent enough. I think it'll be a fantastic game. Both teams now playing the artificial surface, both like to play football now. It'll be a smashing game. I sort of think maybe it'll be a bit like the Cliftonville game last weekend, where Dungannon will plaudits for playing the right way, but maybe get gubbed.
Will Ballymena United be smelling blood on Saturday at 3 o'clock when they see a wounded Linfield come to the showgrounds? Or is this the get-right game for the Blues?
I think it's the latter, Peter. That's just my opinion. Talking to Stuart King last week, he was bracing himself for a backlash against Linfield. It didn't happen. Linfield were sluggish. They weren't at the races at all. Carrick rightly punished them and deserved their victory. That ain't going to go down well in the hallowed halls of Windsor Park at all. I'm expecting a response from Linfield this weekend. David Healy played Cammy Palmer and Jimmy Callagher last Sunday against Carrick, and I think it was the right thing to do. I think it was sort of a statement to say, yes, we know they know mistakes were made, but I think it was good management of David Healy to slot them back in. I think if David had left one of those two out, they could have been scarred for a while yet. So, in summation, I fancy Linfield to bounce back quite well.
Glenavon take on Carrick at Mournview. Could it go either way? I feel just could be an amazing game there.
Yeah, you're right, Peter. It's a fascinating encounter. Not to put it glibly, but I think if Glenavon can keep all their players in the field of play, they would fancy themselves possibly. But I don't think you can underestimate that victory for Carrick last week. And let's not, from how good a victory it was, tails will be up. They're very enterprised and they've got goals in them. I think you were talking about earlier on in the conversation. This could go either way. If you were pushing me, I would maybe fancy Glenavon, but not by a lot. And I think there are definitely going to be goals in this game.
Glentoran go down to Newry. They haven't had an easy time down at the showgrounds for Newry City. If Glentoran can get a goal early, I think they could see it out.
Yeah. That's assuming that Conor McManaman doesn't go anywhere, which I don't anticipate because they'd be looking about 200 grand from, and the clubs that are maybe looking at him, I don't think can afford that really. I have to say, I fancy Glentoran quite strongly here, and that is no disrespect, but it's just the informed team. Their tails are up. Their defence is very, very solid. They've got a great base to move on from. We've talked about the possible difficulties they have in midfield, but it hasn't really affected them this season, and they've too much firepower up front, quite simply, in my book.
And a game that if you could bet, can you bet it's not going to be a 0-0? Because I think this is a game that will almost not be a 0-0. Portadown host Cliftonville. Wow. Cliftonville are just firing on all cylinders going forward, and Portadown are averaging a lot going in at the back. This is a game which Cliftonville can simply not get 3 points in.
Paddy McLaughlin wouldn't appreciate you saying that, maybe, Peter, but yeah, you have to fancy the Reds, no doubt about it. Just where Portadown are at the minute, they're still finding their feet. Again, they're a decent team, Portadown, but there's just been in the games that I've seen, particularly against Glentoran, that were just a cut above Portadown in terms of quality, and I think Cliftonville will be the same. Going forward, they're amazing. They're absolutely superb. And they have a player that I think is an absolutely fabulous player in Jamie McDonough. I simply couldn't believe that Glentoran let him go. And it was another facet to Paddy McLaughlin's magnificent recruitment in recent years at Solitude. So I'd like to see the odds on Cliftonville, to be honest with you, because
very much.
They might be. If I was a betting man, I would have them in the docket, that's for sure.
Yeah. I'm sure Portadown will find their footing, as you put it, eventually, but it's hard when these teams are just firing everything at you so quick and you're still not quite sure who your teammate beside you is, Well, it wasn't for the name on the back of the kit, that's the way Portadown's done it, and this is pretty much been their preseason. Not that preseason was great for them to begin with.
Well, again, not to denigrate Portadown at all. It's just more to praise or big up Cliftonville.
I have squeezed every drop of juice out of yourself today, Stephen. Thank you so much. I think it just shows what an incredible mind, what a brilliant journalist, what a fountain of experience, and it has been amazing talking to yourself, and I no doubt other people will go, I need to get more. I need to get my daily Looney fix. How can they do that? How can they follow you on Twitter and all those places? I imagine you're not big on TikTok.
I don't do TikTok at all. No, I am on Twitter, but I don't really do a lot of get involved a lot because, there's just too much negativity out there, and like, thank you for the kind words. I'm not sure they would be shared, across the landscape in local football. But one thing I'll say, Peter, is, I applaud you for doing this. I'm big into local football. I love the local game. You're obviously a passionate fan and you've done this off your own bat and you deserve credit for it. And as I said off air, like, when I started out in football journalism, there were people that helped me. So I'm always willing to help back wherever I can. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I could talk football all day. Might be nonsense, but I'll talk it.
Well, you've had a good go proving it with me. Thank you so much. And I hopefully get chatting to you very soon.
My pleasure, Peter. Best of luck.
That's it. Another week. 2 sets of game week fixtures there. Kinda. It made an absolutely massive episode. I had an amazing time chatting to Stephen. There was so many different things I was keen to chat to him about. And as you just heard, I pretty much covered them all. That's why there's no Championship Cabaret or no Fantasyland this week. I just couldn't fit it all in. But it will be back next week if I don't talk for, 4 hours with the next guest. I hope you enjoyed it. And if this is your first time here, you're very welcome. I hope you're following me in all those social media places. They're really good because I get to chat more than just an hour or two during the week. You can hit me on Twitter. It's @KickingMatch. You can hit me up on Instagram. It's just Kicking Match. You can follow me on Facebook. Just search Kicking Match. I've got them all nailed down. You can even ask your little grey talking box or little black talking screen in the corner that you talk to sometimes. You can ask them to play this podcast. Just go, hey, little friend, you know what their name is, play Kicking Match, an Irish League podcast. And usually, if you speak in a funny little English accent, they'll do it for you. So just remember that, as they usually don't understand me either. Thanks for listening. Let's do it again soon. And if you're going to a game, have a good time. Thank you. Ta-ra!